welcome. We're going to be a small but mighty crew today, but that's all right. I appreciate everyone coming back for week 4 of Excel. So what we are going to do today is take everything that we have learned so far and combine it to put together a dashboard. So we'll talk a little bit about what a dashboard is, what the purpose of it is, how to kind of lay it out, how to think about design, and then how to actually create it using formulas, pivot tables, all the good stuff that we talked about in weeks. Cool. All right. So the data set that we are going to be using for today, I'm going to talk a little bit about dashboards before we get into it. But the data set we're using today is similar but different from the dashboard or the data set that we used the last couple weeks. So make sure you download a fresh copy. If you go here, you should see week 4, a link for week 4, and that will have our data set. It should say week 4 at the top. If you have any issues with the link or anything, let me know. Right. Cool. So what we're going to do in this session today, this is going to feel just as much, if not more so, kind of like a lab than our last session. So you're actually going to be building a dashboard yourself. You have an opportunity to put your own spin on it a little bit, incorporate some of your own ideas about how it could be designed. So hopefully that'll be a little bit fun, a little bit creative. So we're going to talk a little bit about design, and then we're going to actually build it in this session. So the idea is that this is the type of thing that hopefully in today's session, or maybe with a little bit of fine tuning after today's session, this is something you could think of as a little portfolio project, something you could kind of screenshot or show off as a demonstration of the types of things that you could do in Excel. So we're going to talk about how to design your dashboard, how to think about what the end user of your dashboard might want to see, thinking about the individual elements or components of your dashboard, thinking about laying it out, making it a little bit interactive, and then how to iterate on your dashboard over. All right. So we've covered a whole bunch of stuff so far. We're going to use most of this, bits and pieces of most of this in our session today, because all of these components go into building different types of dashboards. So we've covered formatting, conditional formatting, data validation, basic formulas like dates and math, how to combine formulas, how to look at formula documentation and figure out how to use a new formula, XLOOKUP and its predecessor VLOOKUP. We also talked last week about static tables and charts and pivot tables and charts. All right, so all of that we're going to be using to inform our dashboard development for today. If you missed any of these previous sessions or just need a little refresher, they're in our little tutorial site, which looks like this, has all the references for the last couple weeks in there. So if as we're working on our dashboard today, you need a little bit of a refresher on how to do a pivot table or how to do a formula, you can always pop back to a previous week. You can get access that. Yes, you can go to this link. It's also at the bottom of every slide. Hop on there, put in your USC email, and it'll give you a link to week 4 to download your data. Again, if anyone has issues with the link or anything, just give me a little wave. All right. So all that said, before we get into actually building a dashboard, let's take a little bit of a step back and talk about what this is. So a dashboard is a collection typically of data visualizations, but also tables and detailed data that is going to provide details, prompt someone to take action, or answer questions that someone has. All right, so dashboards can be built in all sorts of tools. If you know how to build a dashboard in Excel, you have a very good head start on knowing how to build a dashboard in a lot of these other tools you might have heard of. Business intelligence tools like Tableau are pretty common. This one is from a system called Salesforce, which some of you might be familiar with. Almost every kind of platform that you might be using to interact with data, especially in sort of the working world, is going to have some sort of reporting, dashboarding feature. And the concepts of using all those are going to be the same as building a dashboard in Excel. All right. So this is an example of a dashboard that's maybe going to answer some questions or provide some details. All right, so this is providing kind of an overall chart. It's providing some sort of single values, right? So a percentage growth number, a customer growth number, and then it's also providing a little bit of detailed information. So it's got a few columns of information down below that are probably sort of a drill down view of this chart. All right, this is another example of a dashboard. This one's a little bit more visual, right? It's all charts. And it's got some combinations, right? So in our donut charts, in our gauge charts here, we also have some total values visible, right? This is 3.5 million of whatever this is measuring. These are intended to just give you an idea of the types of things that fall into the dashboard bucket. If you were here in week 1, we made sort of a Netflix data visualization. That was essentially a very simple dashboard. So you kind of come full circle, right? We did some very simple dashboard stuff there with some basic formulas and some formatting. Now we're going to sort of do that again, but bring in everything we've learned with these more advanced formulas and all the visualization. So just to talk a little bit about building a dashboard, this is something that you might do in any sort of role that interacts with data. So for example, marketing uses a lot of sort of dashboards and visualizations for this sort of analysis. We're going to continue working with our podcast advertising kind of data theme in this session. So that's another area that uses plenty of data, but anything you could think of, retail, government, all these different areas are going to have some sort of dashboard. So when you're making a dashboard, I like to think about it in these 3 kind of different categories of what is your dashboard trying to do. Broadly, it's going to be doing one of 3 things. It's going to be just displaying information, so giving you some kind of simple info and just quick view, executive summary style, all right? The second thing is it might be trying to prompt you to take action, right? If something is in like a red, yellow, green kind of status and you need to take action on the things that are red to resolve problems, right? That's an action dashboard. You can think of that as a to-do list. All right, and then there's the dashboard for sort of answering questions or drilling down, right? This is the dashboard that you can imagine giving someone who's quite curious, who wants to learn a little bit more. This is where you might give someone a lot of filters, a lot of interactive components for them to do their own exploration. All right, so this is a little bit of a silly example, but we're in Los Angeles. Many of you probably drive around. So here are sort of examples of how you could think of these different types of dashboards in a car. All right, so our display dashboard in our car is the basic stuff that we always see. All right, we have our gas gauge, we have how fast we're going, maybe a few other pieces of information, the temperature outside, miles to empty, right? These are just some quick summary pieces of information that you want summed up right in front of you, right? If you're driving, you don't want to have to look over in your glove box to see how much gas is left in your car, right? You want a quick summary right up front. This is a sort of display summary dashboard at a glance. Big numbers, simple charts are really the way to go if you're trying to do a quick summary. Action dashboard. This is kind of an interesting dashboard because these are typically going to be like sort of blank or boring looking when everything's good. Like if everything's all thumbs up, it's like no news is good news. All right, but if things pop up in that dashboard, that means something needs to happen. So for example, if you're driving along and you see your check engine light come on in your car, for example, you know there's a problem. That light isn't even lit up at all. It's typically just kind of blacked out on your dashboard when you're driving. If there's no problem, right? So that's sort of a empty, blank, all good. But if something comes up, it's like something's happening, right? Somebody opened a door, something's going on with your battery, your tire pressure is low, right? That's the type of thing that you would see there. And as you address those things, right? If you put air back in that tire, that light will go away. If you get your engine checked, that light will go away, right? So kind of empties back out. And then the last option, a toolbox dashboard. This is for someone who, if you know you're making this dashboard, for someone who wants to dig around a lot. This is if you're going to give them their own interactive filters. Maybe they typically ask you a lot of follow-up questions when you're providing data to them. The closest you're going to get to this in your car is sorting through your Spotify or your music, or if you have a fancy satellite radio or something, you might be able to do this too, right? You're going to filter by category or genre. You're going to dig around. You might go look in your history. You might look at your Spotify Wrapped and look at all the stuff you looked at last year, right? All of this type of stuff is an example of a more sort of toolbox approach, right? Spotify is going to give you that, and you're going to go use all the filters and stuff yourself. All right. So, the dashboard we're going to make today is more of a display dashboard, but we're going to do a little bit of providing some filters as well to show you how the interactive components can work. So it'll be mostly a display, but kind of a toolbox dashboard for our exercise today. And as you're working on your dashboard, I'm going to give you sort of an outline, like a general set of things that we want on here. But there's also plenty of space for you to kind of tweak it, make it your own. And whenever you're working on a project like this, it's really important to think about the point of view that you have with this. If any of you are here from any sort of communication or journalism programs, you know how important point of view is in something that you're creating. In this case, we really want to think about who's the end user of this, who's going to be looking at this data that we're putting together. In this case, our sample project today is going to go to the chief operating officer of our podcast network. Okay, so this is someone who is in charge of the finances, the daily operations of this thing. This person is really going to want to know how much money are we making? How much money do we make last year compared to this year? What kinds of trends are we seeing that might help me inform how to continue to grow our revenue next year? Right? Those are the types of things that someone's going to be thinking about. So depending on whether you're building a display dashboard or an action dashboard or a toolbox dashboard, you want to think about what your audience is going to be wanting to know, right? So if they're going to want some quick off the bat answers to questions, what might those questions be? If they're going to need to take action, what are those actions, right? You can imagine if we were going to do an action dashboard for our podcast network, that might be something like podcasts that have not posted an episode yet this month, right? We're already 20 days into the month, they haven't posted an episode, that's a problem, right? So you'd want those 3 or 4 podcasts to come up on a list. Maybe you reach out, talk to them, make sure they get an episode published. As they publish an episode, they drop off, that list becomes clear, all right? And the last thing is thinking about what decisions this dashboard should inform, right? So again, thinking about our COO, right? We want to know what decisions should we make to continue growing the network next year. Things like what content of category a podcast is performing really well, right? Which ones are bringing in a lot of ad revenue, getting a lot of downloads, continuing to grow. So when we're thinking about decisions, especially, typically decisions are not made just based on summary dashboards. They're typically made in sort of more of our toolbox form of dashboards, right? Where you're digging down a little bit, getting into some different filters or more details, drilling down to sort of understand where the summary information is coming from. All right, so this part is a little bit less technical than what we're going to be doing today, but just sort of what you should be thinking about as we're working on this. If you're thinking about sort of how you want to format your chart or how you want to kind of lay it out, what you want to make easily visible, these are the types of things that you want to be thinking about. All right, so the only new or like completely new piece of content that we're going to talk about today is how to add interactive features to your dashboard. All right, we'll come back to this, but I'm just going to give a quick preview, which is if you were here last week, you saw the pivot charts that we created, or maybe you've seen pivot charts elsewhere. The last piece of pivot charts that we did not talk about is how to add slicers and timelines. Slicers and timelines are going to allow you to click on sort of user-friendly buttons, kind of like this, that are going to dynamically filter your chart. So you've probably seen this in a variety of online platforms that you use. So that's the part that we're going to use. I'm going to come back to how we're going to actually do this a little bit later because I think it'll make more sense. But once you have a chart, slicers and timelines are something that we're going to be adding today to sort of get into that toolbox component that I was mentioning. All right. Cool. So when you're going to start making a dashboard, you should think of this as an iterative process. All right. So typically what I'm doing when I'm making a dashboard for my job is I'm doing a little bit of brainstorming. So I'm taking all the information, all the sort of requirements or questions that I'm being given to answer. And then I'm going to start thinking about what makes sense to present that information, right? If I want something like annual revenue, that's probably just like a single number. But if I want something like, cumulative revenue over the course of the year, that's probably going to be something more like a line chart, right? Something that's going to demonstrate growth over time. So again, these are just, I'm going to give you some kind of guidelines for creating a dashboard, sort of a starting point to work towards. But you should be thinking about what you think sort of our COO audience might like to see. And if you think there's a different chart type that would make more sense to answer the question, you should absolutely use that in today's exercise. The other thing I would say is we learned last week how fast it is to make pivot tables. So if you're starting to think about how you might want to display your data, I would encourage you to make one pivot table that's just sort of a trying stuff out, drag and drop some different stuff around, see how it looks, make sure you can sort of get the view that you want to get. So you should think of this as sort of creating a draft, iterating on it, creating another draft, etc. All right. Okay. So this is our project, and this is all in your tutorial. So you should be able to see something like this. If anyone didn't get to this link, let me know and I can make sure you get there. So you're going to download your data set. Again, it's sort of similar to, but a little different from the data we've been using the last 2 weeks. And we are going to start on our project. So our COO of the podcast network has asked us to create a dashboard to track the company's top key metrics related to revenue, right? COO cares about revenue. So these are the metrics that the COO has asked us to produce. We want to see our monthly downloads by podcast content category, right? Get a sense of where most of the downloads in our network are coming from. We want to see our top 5 advertisers this year by revenue. We want to see our cumulative revenue this year compared to last year, right? How are we doing? Are we growing year over year? And then I want you to think of one other sort of metric or statistic or chart that you think a COO might like to see based on the data that we have. All right, this is quite common if you're the person sort of working with a little bit more closely with the data to do something like this for someone who's a little bit less close to the data. They're going to be relying on you to sort of apply some of your own critical thinking and say, hey, while I was in here getting the thing you requested, I also noticed this interesting thing, or thought you might also want to see this metric, right? That's an important component of looking at your data. This also makes sure that you really have looked at and understand the data set that you're working with, okay? So we're going to think of these 4 pieces as components of our dashboard. All right, so what is a component? It's going to be a chart or a table or a single metric. As we're working on our dashboard, which again, we're going to kind of jump to that shortly, I would encourage you to work on one component at a time, right? So these are sort of arranged in order of least complex to most complex, right? So start with the first one, get that to a state where it's good, but don't worry about all the perfect formatting and all of that. You want to go through and get each of these kind of generally looking correct, and then you can worry about laying them out so they look all nice. So all of those components together are going to look something like this. All right, so we might have table, we might have some different chart formats, and we might have some slicers and timelines that are going to add some cool interactive components to our dashboard, depending on what we select. Okay, so this is sort of what we're going to be creating. Again, this is the not sort of fully formatted version. We talked a lot about formatting in our first session. We've got a little fancier with the colors and all of that. So we'll do that if we have time. But main thing I want you to get to is getting all your charts and interactive pieces working and onto the same sheet. And then we can do little finishing touches at the end. Cool. All right, so creating components for your dashboard. All of the sort of skills you need to make these components besides the adding of our interactive slicer bits we've covered in previous weeks. So I do not have sort of step-by-step instructions for you about each of these things. That said, we've covered step-by-step instructions for all these things in the last couple of weeks. So again, if you need a refresher, you can hop back to some notes from our previous weeks. And I've also left you some hints for each of our 3 sort of defined components and some little brainstorming ideas for your 4th sort of your own component, okay? So I would start with downloads by category, your first component. That's going to be pretty simple. Again, if you're like, how do I make a pivot table again? You can jump back up here to week 3. you can pop down here to our pivot table section, and I've got full step-by-step directions in there. All right, so you're just gonna need to apply those to this data set. But that's what we're gonna do. So how this is gonna work is I'm gonna give you all a little bit of time to work on our first component. We'll check in, I'll sort of float around. So if you get stuck, need help, give me a little wave, I'll come help you. We'll check in after a little bit, see how that first component's going. If you're feeling really good, you should feel free to work ahead. Everything you need to make this whole dashboard is in here. And if you're feeling a little stuck or behind, don't worry. We'll kind of check in at a few checkpoints to see how each of these is going. Does that make sense? Any questions about how this is gonna work? Okay, cool. Anything else I wanted to tell you before we get started? Our second and third components are going to use a little bit of our formula knowledge. All right, so you shouldn't need that for our first component, but you might need it for our second too. Again, you can jump back or ask me questions. Happy to help. All right, sound good? Okay, cool. I'm gonna give us a little bit of time to work on our first component, and we'll check back in and we'll do a little check-in in like 5-ish minutes, see how we're feeling. Okay.
In the new table, I don't see the monthly downloads.
That's gonna be in it. So this has a few different sheets,
Oh.
and it's gonna be under shows.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I want to ask you. This is the first time.
Oh,
I
well,
do. Thanks. So I have. How do I add this? So do I just start?
yeah, totally.
On this.
So you've got a few different tabs in your sheet. If you hit this little arrow down here, they're a little hidden for some reason when you first download it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
okay, so these are our 4 tabs. Yeah, so for that first one, yeah, so I guess,
Shows.
yeah, I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. So
Thank you
this,
so
yeah,
much.
no, you're totally fine. So
I'm like lost right now.
yeah, you're all good. Okay, so our scenario is that our podcast network has 500 podcasts. So if you
Okay.
take a look down here, this
It's
is
500.
Yep, this is 500 different podcasts and
Okay.
information about each one.
Yeah.
You'll see that our first column here is a show ID. All right, so if you go all the way back up to the top.
Okay.
That's ID, that's like an ID number to identify that show.
Mhm.
That'll connect to some of the other pieces of information that we have. So we've got things like download number, content category, title of the podcast, that kind of thing. Our episodes tab is going to have details about specific episodes that people have uploaded. So each episode has an ID, but each show has an ID as well. So
Okay.
for example, this first one is an episode of show number 143. So you'd have to go back to the other tab, scroll down to 143 to see which show that episode goes with.
This one, right?
Yep. Yeah, does that make sense? So that's what the ID numbers are doing. They're sort of connecting.
Okay.
So these are episodes of all 500 of our different shows, and you can tell which show they go with based on their show ID number. Does that make sense?
Oh. Wait, so this ID is
Yep.
for the episodes?
Yep,
And this one's for shows?
yep, exactly.
Okay, so they are connected. The episode one is connected to the show number.
Yeah, yeah. So the show ID is gonna be connected to the ID on the show tab.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Cool. And then our next tab, so these two are data about campaigns. So these are advertising campaigns on different podcasts. So again, campaigns have a specific ID. They'll also tell you what advertiser it is. The show ID again, so that's this one goes with is a campaign on show 209 from the other tab.
Okay.
What month that campaign was running, and then the CPM. The CPM is an advertising metric, which is the dollars per 1,000 downloads. So I have a little example of the
Why is
formula.
CPM the dollars per?
Yeah, it's called cost per mil or cost per
Cost per
thousand. It's like
mil.
an advertising
Okay.
metric. Yeah. So to get revenue from CPM, you multiply it by the downloads and divide by 1,000. That's
Oh,
this
okay.
right here. So we have 2 tabs, one for 2024 campaigns and
So it's gonna
one
be-
for 2025 campaigns.
downloads is gonna be in the shows.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if I were you, what I would do is I would start with our very first one, which is just creating a pivot table.
Okay.
And you're gonna wanna make a pivot table based on our show
Should
sheet.
I? Okay.
Perfect. And then what you can hop back to, if you go back to our little tutorial, into week 3 under pivot tables. This will, you can kind of follow this sort of step by step. How
Awesome.
you're gonna group
Okay.
it is gonna be a little different, but I would start with that.
Okay.
And if you get
I'm
stuck, give
gonna
me a
try
little bit.
this.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's intended to be sort of lab.
Thanks.
Just holler if you get stuck.
Okay.
All right, how we doing on pivot table? Show of hands if you think you might have part of a pivot table together. Couple people, okay, great. I'm gonna download a fresh copy of this. And through. All right, great. Cool. Okay, so for my downloads by category, anyone who has a pivot table want to tell us how you got there? I saw a hand somewhere here. Somebody over here have a pivot table? Vivek, you have one?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to tell us what you did?
So the rows are each, first you do, control or command A to select. all
Command
the
A, so I'm in my shows tab, I'm selecting all my data, a good little shortcut for that, it's Command A or Control A, great.
And then I think you go to insert and then pivot table.
Great, insert up here in my ribbon,
And then you click on pivot table.
and then click on pivot table, all right, fantastic. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and do mine in a new worksheet. All right,
And then you move category to rows and then monthly downloads to values.
great, so I'm over here in my little field list, I'm gonna take category, and exactly as you said, move it down, just drag and drop down to rows. All right, and then I'm gonna take monthly downloads and drag and drop down to my values. Great, very good. I might do a couple other little kind of formatting things here. I might, for example, sort these from most to least downloads. I would do that here. Come in and do sort descending, but instead of sorting by category alphabetically, I want to sort by my sum of downloads. All right, so as soon as I do that, they'll be in order. I might also want to do a little number formatting. These are pretty big numbers, so it's nice to show them with 1,000 separators. So I might come in here to my home ribbon, go to my number formatting or number formats to get a little more specific. And this is where I can say, use the 1,000 separator. And again, I don't want to include decimal places if it's not a fractional number. In this case, downloads are not, there's not really an idea of a partial download. So I'm gonna move that to 0. And now my numbers are a little easier to read. I can see at a glance. Bigger, sorry. With 1,000 separators, I can see a little more easily that it's 22 million versus 2 million. Okay, any questions about how we got to this pivot table? Okay, cool. So pretty much anytime you're working on a dashboard component, it's almost always going to be some sort of pivot table. It might be the case that you do a pivot table and then you realize you don't have all the data you need. So you need to go back and do some formulas, come back and do your pivot table. This one's pretty straightforward. It might be the case that you do your pivot table, you do a chart, you realize it's not quite how you want it. So you go back and adjust your pivot table a little bit, adjust your chart. So again, this is a pretty simple one to just get us kind of warmed up. But you should think about this as a little bit of an iteration. Okay. Usually when I'm making a dashboard, I end up with a whole bunch of tabs that are all kind of my different drafts and me trying stuff. And then we'll combine these all into one tab and sort of put them all together, make them a bit more tidy. Okay. Great. So that is our first component. I'm going to go back to our little guide here. Okay, great. So I've decided to leave mine as a table. If you want to get a little fancy and make that one into a pivot chart as well, go right ahead. But otherwise, I would say let's move on to our second component. All right, I've left us a few hints here. You're going to notice that you're going to need to use a couple of formulas. For this component, looking at our data here, we're going to be looking at, I think we said 2024. Yeah, 2024. So you're going to want to look at our campaigns 2024 tab. And to help you out a little bit, I've left a few sort of columns that are going to need to be filled in with some formulas. All right, so it's a little hint for you. So you can either kind of start with a pivot table and then see what formulas you need. You can start with the formulas, go to pivot table, whatever works better for you. But the main sort of idea of what we're trying to do here is to get our revenue number so that we can summarize that in our table. And if you look at our campaign information, we have our CPM but we don't have our downloads, so we can't calculate revenue. Revenue is going to equal our CPM times downloads divided by 1,000. That's our cost per mil, our cost per 1,000 impressions. All right, but you notice we have our show ID, right? So show ID will tell us, all right, so let's say this first one, we were going to do this by hand. My CPM is $23. I want to see how many downloads show number 209 gets. So I'd go to my shows tab, I'd scroll all the way down to 209. It's this show. I would find out that that show has 186,000 downloads. So I come back over here, 186,000 downloads, and then calculate my revenue, right? That's conceptually what we're doing. You're going to use that XLOOKUP formula that we covered in week 2. We get our downloads number from that other sheet to do that lookup that I just described. And then we're just going to need to do that simple math, which I put right here for you. Revenue is CPM times downloads divided by 1,000 in that revenue column. All right, so those are the formulas you're going to need. Once you have those formulas together, you can work through to your pivot table, pivot chart. When we get to the end of this one, I'll also have you add a timeline component, which will start to give us some of those interactive pieces. So this one's a little trickier with the formulas. It's a couple more steps. So I'm going to give us another chunk of time to work on this one. If you're feeling stuck on any of the formulas, trying to figure out which sheet to find everything, just give me a little wave and I'll help. Cool? All right, great. All right, sure. Let me just a second.
Well, I guess like I tried like doing the X lookup.
Okay, cool.
Like this column,
Mhm.
and then
Okay.
like this column,
Mhm.
and then this column because it's the downloads.
Yep.
And then it's like not working. So then I like switched the first two, and that also didn't work. So I guess I was like a bit stuck.
Okay, cool. You're very close. So a couple suggestions. Anytime you're doing text, it's going to need to be included in quotes.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's not going to go out with that. So I get some quotes in there. And then the second thing, so if you go, yeah, you can, let's click into our formula again here. And all
Or
right.
if we just select this.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Because when you're in your formula, if you go into the little, yeah. So you can tell because it's asking you for a lookup value
Mhm.
instead of that array.
Yeah.
So that's just that one value for your first argument. And then, so
Mhm.
yeah, you were in all the right columns.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Make sense? Cool.
Yeah. So should I do the sort and filter? I don't know.
Yeah, so let's just start with our general X lookup to start. So go back over here.
Yeah.
Up a little bit. All right, so let's see.
It doesn't tell you like how to do it. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So what you want to do is anytime you're, oh, I'm so sorry.
No
Anytime-
worries. Yeah.
Go back to your sheet. So anytime you're working on a formula, you want to do your, if you type an equal sign in here.
Here.
Yep. And then the name of our formula is lookup. All one word.
Do I like
Yeah.
capitalize? Usually.
You don't have to. You can be.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And then no.
Yep. So you're gonna do X lookup and then an open parentheses, like you're about to do. Yep. Great. Okay, and then it's gonna give you some information about what your arguments should be.
Oh,
So I don't, have you worked with formulas in Excel before?
I think I know some.
A little bit? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are telling you what pieces of information you need to give into the formula so that you get
Mhm.
what you want out. So for XLOOKUP, our first thing is the piece of information that is, we want to go look up in that other list.
Yeah.
The next piece of information, our array, is what column do we want to go look for that information in?
Oh.
And then our return array is what piece of information we want to return from that column. So for example, so what I kind of just talked through with the show 209, right? If we were going to go do this by hand without a formula,
Yeah.
we would say, all right, ID 209, so that's our
Go
value.
to the row 209.
Exactly. We go in our shows tab and look in that column to find 209.
Mhm.
And then the piece of information we want back is that download. So whatever. So once we find show 209,
Yeah.
we just go across to download.
Downloads.
Yeah. So
Okay.
those are the three pieces of information we need to give it. So we need to give it this cell here with our show ID. So you can actually just click right where it says 209
Oh,
and that'll give
Oh,
D2.
cool.
Perfect.
Okay.
They're separated with commas. Yep. Perfect. And then our second argument is going to be our column.
No.
You don't need to.
It's okay.
It doesn't matter. Our columns, so you can go just with your mouse, yep, and select our whole shows column. You can actually click where it says A and that'll grab
This
whole
one?
thing. Yep. Perfect. One more comma because we've now got to do our last argument, and then the column that has our downloads.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Return here.
Yep. Perfect.
But,
Yeah, the
no.
little pop-up's like a little in the way, but if you go right underneath it. Yeah.
Okay.
That should do it.
Amazing.
Cool. And then close your parentheses. And hit enter. Great. So that went and grabbed our 186,000 downloads.
And then just copy,
Mhm.
paste everything.
Perfect. Yep.
Is there another way like I can just drag it?
Yeah, if you hit escape, you got it like copied or whatever. So if you hit escape to get out of that,
Skip this one? Oh.
and then if you just double click the or the little cursor thing.
Oh.
Our little cursor thing turns.
This one?
Yeah, double click.
Double click. Oh,
Paste it all the way down.
amazing.
Cool.
Wow.
As a hint, we're gonna end up needing to do that on our other tab as well. So if you want to try it on that one while you're
Okay.
feeling fresh, that
Thank
might be
you.
it.
Wow.
It's gonna be the again shows.
Iron shows. Like.
The ID here is our show ID.
Oh,
So
okay,
yeah,
show ID.
typically if it just says ID, then you want to put it as like path name.
Oh,
Yeah, 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 good question.
So I created the pivot table and then filter your value.
Yeah, so from here you can drag and drop these down to these sections. So for this one, we want revenue by advertiser. So it's kind of, that's similar to how we did downloads by category before. So you wanna
Okay,
think
so-
about your road, yeah. Yep, so the value we wanna get is our revenue.
Revenue.
Yep, and then we wanna split it up by the different advertisers. Yeah, the good news with pivot table is if you mess anything up, you can drag and drop it, move it all around, and it's all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I just filter.
Yeah, so those filter options are gonna be under here. Yeah.
Oh. Oh. Maybe.
All right, so on this one, there's been a couple good questions about formulas, so do little review of these, a little overview of these in case anybody else is feeling a little stuck. All right, so for downloads, this is where we're gonna use that lookup formula, all right? So a couple good things to know about this. This column has our show ID, which is what's gonna link that information over to our shows sheet. It's pretty common in data structures for every sort of table, or in this case, sheet of our workbook, to have a column that just says ID. And then in the other columns, it's referred to as whatever that table is ID. Does that make sense? So shows has a column that just says ID, episodes has a column that just says ID. But in this case, our column that just says ID is our show ID, right? So on our shows tab, we can see there's one per show. And on our episodes tab, this column also just says ID, but that's actually our episode ID. If we had another tab that was going to refer back to this ID, it would say episode ID. All right, so it's very common in data, so there's something to get used to. We have the same thing actually on our campaigns tab here. We have a campaign ID, and then we have our show ID. So that's just something to know. If you're looking for that ID and can't find the matching name exactly, you want to go to your tab name and just think about what it just says ID, what that might mean, how that might be referred to. Okay. A couple refresher questions about XLOOKUP. As a reminder, if you are feeling a little rusty on formulas or a little rusty on XLOOKUP, something very helpful to do is go to your insert drop down at the top and do, or I'm sorry, your view drop down at the top and do view formula builder. This is going to give you our handy little helper window on the side. So if you're like, what's XLOOKUP again? Obviously you could Google or ChatGPT it. But to keep it all in the same window, which is pretty handy, you can just pop your formula in here and it'll give you a quick little description of what those arguments are that you need in your function. Okay, cool. So let's do a little review of our XLOOKUP in case anybody's feeling stuck. All right, when we start our XLOOKUP, we're gonna always start with our equal sign. We're gonna type the name of our function, XLOOKUP. It often is in all caps by convention in Excel, but it is not required to be in all caps. I'm gonna do my open parentheses, and then I'm gonna get, again, my helpful little pop-up to remind me what arguments I need. Any of these arguments in brackets are not required. Okay, brackets mean optional there. All right, so my first argument that I need is my lookup value. Anytime it says value, that means one cell. Anytime it says array, that means a whole column. All right, so lookup value is what piece of information do I want to go look up in my other table. So in this case, I want to go look up the show ID, right? I want to go find show 209 in my shows tab and then find the corresponding number of downloads. So what I'm going to do here is grab this cell. I can either click on it or I could type in D2 on my keyboard because it's in column D and row 2. I like to click. I think that's easier, but up to you. I'm going to do comma because all my arguments are going to be separated with a comma. And then this is lookup array. So this is the column. Where would I go look for show 209? What column would I go look in? I would go to my shows tab and I would go look for 209 in this column, right? My show ID. I know it's show ID number 209. So if I were just doing this with my eyeballs, I would physically scroll down to 209. Instead, I'm just going to tell the formula, go find 209 in this column for me. You're a computer, you're probably better at that anyway, right? So I'm going to give it this whole column, which I'm going to do by just clicking on this column header. I can see in my formula bar that it's going to auto-populate shows exclamation point column A. And that's because it's just telling the formula, hey, even though we're writing the formula on our campaigns 2024 tab, you have to go look up in this other sheet. So just by clicking over and clicking into this column, it's auto-populating with that. I'm gonna go back in my little formula bar here, just add another comma, all right, and then it'll highlight for me my third argument. So that's how I know my two first arguments are in there, okay? I gotta give it my third argument, which is return array. So array means column, right? I gotta go down to my column. And what column do I wanna go look for my return value, my number of downloads? What column on this sheet would I find that in? Yes, perfect, column F. Fabulous. My little pop-up is kind of hiding, but I can sneak my little mouse in there and click on that column header. So I got my whole column F. Right, so now what this formula is going to do is it's going to say, all right, find the show ID in D2. Go over to our show sheet, look for that ID in column A. If you find it, scoot across to column F and grab me whatever's in column F for that value. All right, that's all we're doing here. There's a little optional if not found. So if I wanted, depending on how I'm using the data, I could type a little message in here, something like not found. If I wanted to do that, I would do it in quotes because any text needs to be in quotes, but that is totally optional. All right, so I'm going to do that for show 209. I should get 186,000 downloads. So that's here. Once you have that formula working, you can hover right on our little lower corner. So our little cursor swaps from light to dark and double click and that'll paste it all the way down. Any questions about that? Getting an error, getting something different? Okay. Cool. Great. And then the very next thing I would do is another formula in my revenue column. And this is where I would use my revenue formula right here. So again, CPM is that value, cost per 1,000 downloads is how much the advertiser is paying. Say, all right, every 1,000 times someone hears this McDonald's ad, I'm going to pay you $23. That's our CPM rate. So that's how, this is our formula for how we get back to our revenue amount. How much in total did this advertiser spend to run that ad on our podcast? All right. So for a math formula like this, I always start with my equal sign, even if it's just a math formula, but I can go a little simpler here. I don't need any function names. I can just go grab whatever cells and type in my math. So in this case, again, my formula, CPM times downloads divided by 1,000. So just in this row here, our row-based formula, I'm going to go grab our CPM in this row, which is C2. I'm going to multiply it, so just a little asterisk, by our number of downloads. Okay. Multiply it by our number of downloads, which is here in F2. All right, and then I'm going to divide by 1,000. All right, so this is what's saying go grab whatever's in C2, multiply it by whatever's in F2, divide it by 1,000. I'm going to do that. Looks like I already formatted this column as dollars, so it's already showing up as dollars, which is great. I would want to do that if I wasn't doing that already. And then same deal here. I can go on my little corner, double click, just paste all the way down all those populated cells. Any questions, errors? Anyone getting anything different for our revenue? We're getting $4,000 for this first one. All right, so that is our formula component. So if you're feeling a little stuck on the formulas, that should get you what you need to do this part, which is working on creating our pivot table. So to get our top 5 advertisers, we want to know what are those advertisers, what's their revenue, how do we get our top 5, and then how do we display that in a chart? So my little sample chart, I did it as a horizontal bar chart. Up to you if you think a different chart format is better. But this, you should end up with a chart like this from your pivot chart that should have 5 bars or dots, whatever you want to do, for those top 5 advertisers. All right, so in case you're a little stuck on the formulas, hopefully that helped. Give me a little wave if you're still stuck, but I'll give you a few minutes to work on our chart for this one. I should end up with something like this, should have 5, our top 5 advertisers.
If we change data in the original sheet, is our pivot table also gonna change automatically?
Great question. It is not going to change automatically unless you're in Google Sheets. Google Sheets will
Okay.
update automatically. If you are not in Google Sheets, what you should do is click on your pivot table, go to your pivot table, analyze up here and hit refresh. And that will pull in any updates that you made to your data.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like an annoying extra step.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
just a separate thing?
Yeah, it's a separate thing, so you can kind of drag and drop where you want, and you can also format it if you want to do colors or anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, no.
How to add a timeline? I didn't find it.
Yeah, no, you're doing great so far. Perfect, so you're gonna go to your animals.
Oh, cool.
There you go, perfect. Yeah, so if you like had multiple dates, it would have let you pick like which, but.
Oh, I see.
So, and then see if you can like format it differently if you want, yeah.
Wait, right? No. Okay.
Yeah, so as soon as you click it, it'll update your chart.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Very cool. Looks like many of you are in some stage of having a pivot table for this, so we can look at it together here. So what I'm gonna do is make, now that I have my two formulas filled out here, I'm gonna make a pivot table based on this information. So again, I'm gonna select all, which is gonna be my command A. I'm gonna do insert pivot table. I'm gonna pop it in a new worksheet. And in this case, I want revenue by, I want our top 5 advertisers by revenue, right? So the thing I'm grouping by here is advertiser, how much did they spend overall? And then the value that I want is their revenue, right? For most pivot tables, you're mostly going to use rows and values. It's a little less common to set up columns here, but there are definitely use cases for that. Okay, so I've got my grouping by advertiser name doing, I should make sure this says sum of revenue. If for some reason it doesn't say sum right there, you can just click on your little eye icon and make sure that you select sum in our list. All right, bigger. Okay, great. So now I've got my pivot table. I could go ahead and sort by revenue, right? So I could see my top 5, which are these guys, but I don't want these other ones, right? I just want to display the top 5 for my summary dashboard. So to get my top 5, this is a little bit weird in Excel, but I'm going to go back here to my labels, which is going to give me some kind of filter options. I'm going to say I want to filter by value. All right, so my second to last option right here. And to get my top 5, I'm going to click top 10. They have labeled it top 10. I do not know. I would not have labeled it that, but as it is, you hit top 10 and then you can type in any number you want that is not 10. So exactly, I would type in 5 here. And as soon as I do that, I can see right behind that's updating, which is pretty cool. Right, great. And I want to make sure that I have it sorted descending by revenue, because if I don't, it'll just give me the first 5 alphabetically, right? To make sure that your numbers are going largest to smallest. All right, great. So from here, I am going to come over to this guy and I'm going to input a pivot chart. All right, so this is just a chart that's connected to my pivot table. Again, all I'm doing there is I'm clicked on my chart, I've gone to my insert ribbon, and I've hopped over here to pivot chart. All right, and I'm going to say it's going to match my chart exactly. If I make any changes to my chart or to my table, they should reflect in my chart. So let's say I wanted to switch this to do, say my bottom 5 instead. And make this here. That's going to go ahead and update. And then I see my chart updates automatically. right? So any updates I make to my table are gonna get made in my chart. So let me go back to my top 10. Okay, cool. So you should have a chart that looks something like this. It'll just pick a chart for you as you start. You though have the power to change it to any chart that you like. So once you're clicked into your pivot chart, you'll see a few new tabs come up in your ribbon. You've got pivot chart analyze, pivot chart design, and pivot chart format. All right, so if I go to my pivot chart design, this is where I can change my chart type up here. And I'll see a few different options. For me personally, for this one, I like the horizontal bars, so I would do something like this. I can also do a little bit of futzing around with the layout here. I don't really need the legend because that's not really giving me any useful information. So I can go to my add chart element here, come down to legend and just change it to none. All right, that evens out my formatting a little bit. I might give this a title here, something like 2024 top 5 advertisers by revenue, something like this. And then I can also come into my pivot chart design ribbon right here, and I can pick a bunch of sort of predefined formats where they've done some funky little, if I want my colors to be darker or lighter, this gradient one's kind of cool, bigger, something like that. All right. Very last thing for this one is adding a timeline. So this is adding up all of our revenue by 2024, but you could imagine I'd want to know what the top advertiser was in January versus July, for example. So to do that, I can add a timeline, which is a type of slicer. So as long as you're clicked into your chart, you come up to your pivot chart analyze ribbon, and you're going to see right in the middle, insert timeline. What this is going to do is it's going to look in your data set for any columns that are formatted as a date, and it's going to allow you to do sort of a nicely formatted little filter. So when you click on that, you're going to have a little pop-up which grabs all the columns that it found that are date formatted. In this case, we just have one column, which is our month of our campaign. So I'm just going to click that one and hit OK. And that's going to give me this handy dandy little box right here that's got each month nicely laid out for me. Ooh, nicely laid out for me. So I can click on any, say, individual month. Let's look at March. Okay, so it looks like in March, these are my top 5 advertisers. In October, it's a slightly different list of my top 5 advertisers. I can also select multiple months. So it's kind of a nice, handy drag and drop, especially if you're going to be sharing this dashboard with someone who's a little less data savvy, who might not know how to navigate the formulas or be a little overwhelmed by a whole sheet. Something like this quick drag and drop is going to be a little more user-friendly to someone who's not maybe quite as data savvy. Once I've selected some stuff in my filter, if you just want to go back to my unfiltered view, I can just hit my little X filter icon right up here in the upper right of my slicer. And that will clear my filter and just go back to my standard table.
Can you do that again?
Yeah, adding the timeline.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so get rid of this. So once I've got my pivot chart, I'm going to go up in my ribbon to pivot chart analyze up here. Should have an option in the middle next to insert slicer, it's the insert timeline. And then it's going to pop up with some suggested columns. In this case, it's only suggesting one column because nothing else is formatted as a date. So I'm just going to check that little box and hit OK. And then I'm going to get this. It usually just drops it somewhere in the middle of the page. So I'm just going to drag it somewhere more helpful. Make it a little wider. Make it a little wider so I can get all my months. That view. And then maybe I'll change the format to, I don't know, this darker blue to match my bars a little bit better.
So you can't add down to the 2025 version, right?
Can I add a slicer to the 2025 version?
Yeah, like if you were to do a table based on the 2025 data.
Yeah, good question. So I could do the same thing on the 2025 tab, right, where I have my advertisers and then I have my timeline. I could, if I want them to be all combined in one chart with one slicer, I could combine my 2 data sets and create one chart out of both of them. That's also an option. Anything else? Let's see, did we cover everything we need to do about this one? I added a timeline, horizontal bars, top 5. Okay, cool. I guess the last thing I would say, as we start creating our components and our slicers, I might start thinking about how I want to lay these out on a dashboard. So typically for that, I would start a new sheet, label it something like dashboard. And then I might start moving over any components I've already created. So this was my pivot table from our first component. In order to move a pivot table, it can get, depending on your Excel version, it can get a little funky if you just copy and paste. But if you click on your pivot table, you go to pivot table analyze, it'll give you an option to move your pivot table over on the right-hand side of your ribbon. So next to change data source, it says move pivot table. I can click that, and then I can go tell it specifically where I want to move my pivot table to. It's going to give me my little location thing. You might remember this. We looked at this last time when we looked at charts. I can click this weird little icon and I can just go navigate and click on where I want this to go. So I'm going to leave myself a little room for a header. So maybe I want this chart to go a little ways down on the page. I'm going to select B8 on my dashboard tab. Come back to my little pop-up here and hit OK. And that'll just move my pivot table right on over from the other tab. I didn't have to redo it or anything. Again, depending on your Excel version, they can get a little weird if you just copy paste. So I'd recommend moving them.
You.
Yeah.
Do it again.
Yeah. So anytime you're clicked on your pivot table, just go to your pivot table analyze button up here.
Okay.
And then you'll get your move pivot table. Should be something like this. If your screen's a little smaller, this might just be an icon. You're looking for the one with the little arrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Be right up here. Also, sometimes if you're, depending on your screen size or how you have it set, you might see some more like drop downs like this. If it's drop down, it'd be under actions.
Why it's saying like the destination is not valid?
Okay, so when you go to move your pivot table, you got to click on a cell that's going to be relevant. So it should
Okay.
say something like the name of one of your sheets and then the name of a cell. So you want to make sure that makes sense. So in my case, like let's say I wanted to move it further down the page. I know I'm on my dashboard sheet, so I'd want it to still be there and I want it to be say B28. So I would click on this and then I'm going to just come back here and hit OK. But before I click OK, you'd want to just look at this and make sure this makes sense. If this is for some reason like longer, maybe you like double clicked it somehow and it showed up twice, something like that, it's going to give you an error. Just make sure it makes sense. This first word is going to be our sheet name, exclamation point, and then the cell. Questions about our moving our table? Okay, cool. And then I can do the same thing with my other pivot table. So once I have my chart, same thing when I'm in my pivot chart analyze, I have a move chart button, which is very similar to my move pivot table button. So I can do move chart. This is even a little simpler because the chart's going to sort of float on top of the cells. So when I do move chart, I get this little drop down option where I can pick which sheet I want it to go into. So I'm just going to pick my dashboard one. This is another good reason to label your sheet so it's clear which one is which. I'm going to hit OK and it's going to be floating. Ooh, it's going to be floating around here so I can drag and drop it maybe a little further down. Then I got to make sure to move my slicer. Ooh, let's see. Here's my slicer or my timeline, I should say. Move my timeline. I don't know. Yeah, there's not as handy of a way to move this. These do tend to work if you copy paste. So I'm just going to take this guy, drop this over. Let's see if that works. Being a little cranky copy pasting. So if you can't move your timeline, you can just come to this new tab and do insert timeline again from here. Do these 2 clicks again. And you're all good. I think there's a way to move them, but since I updated my Excel, I do not know where that button went. Drag this over. Again, I can do my same little formatting. Update if I want to, make sure that still works. It's still gonna update everything for me. So the pivot tables are going to be sort of baked into the sheet. So these, if you want to move this within the sheet, you're still going to need to do your pivot table analyze move pivot table. our charts and slicers and things kind of float on top. So once those are in the sheet you want, you can just kind of drag them around. So I can just drag these down a little bit, for example, and you should be all good to go. All right. Cool. All right, so we have our next component, which is our cumulative revenue year over year, or YOY is a common abbreviation for that. So for this one, we're gonna need a couple of formulas again. Now, the good news is 2 of these formulas we have already done. So on this tab, our 2025 campaigns data, right? So far, we've mainly worked with our 2024 campaigns data. On our 2025 campaigns data, we have our same 2 columns, our monthly downloads and our revenue. Those are gonna be exactly the same like formula setups that we just did for our 2024. So our monthly downloads needs to be X lookup and our revenue needs to be that same math. So do those as a quick refresher, get one more rep in. You'll notice there's one important difference between our 2025 campaign data and our 2024 campaign data, which is in our 2024 tab, we have our campaign month and it'll say something like December 1st, 2024 or February 1st, 2024. It's formatted as a date. If you go to our 2025 campaigns tab, it's not formatted as a date. It says campaign month number. Okay, so what that means is it's just giving us the month. So this first campaign is in May for 5, but it's not formatted as a date, meaning that, for example, that timeline thing we just did isn't going to work because that's not as straightforward. Now, thankfully, there's a formula that is an easy fix for this. So that's the third formula you're going to need to do on this page. So we got monthly downloads, we got revenue, and there's one more blank column here, which is campaign month. You're going to use a formula called date for this. Okay, this is not a formula we've used before, but it is a very simple one. So it's a chance to practice looking at what the formula should be and working on the inputs. So for this one, I'm going to do view my formula builder. Get out of here, view formula builder. All right, and this formula is just called date. All right, so this is here, and it's going to tell me that it takes in a year, month, day, and then returns a date. All right, so it's gonna give me all the detail. Year is a number from 1904 to 9,999, which is a year very far in the future for those of you into sci-fi. Month is a number from 1 to 12 representing the month of the year. That's what we have in column E, right? We just have the month, the number representing the month. And then day is a number from 1 to 31, obviously. If we go look in our 2024 data, we see that these are always the first of the month. It's not really a specific date, it's just kind of telling us the month. So all we would ever need for the day in our date formula is just the number. Okay, so over here. Whew. All right, so again, column F, you're going to use that new date formula. You could go ahead and do your little formula builder to look at how it's set up. You can also Google how to do the date formula, how to do your arguments, and get that sorted out. So you're going to need to give it a year. You're going to need to give it this month and then the first day. And then monthly downloads and revenue are going to be those same 2 formulas that we just did. Okay, so I'd start with those formulas, and then we're going to do a pivot table where we're going to look at the running total over the year. So in this one, in my example one, I just have 2024, but we're going to end up with 2 of these. So we're going to end up with like a 2024 chunk and a 2025 chunk. So we can compare side by side. All right, so this is small, in a little bit. So for this one, you're going to end up with a pivot chart that looks something like this, cumulative over here. Okay, work on those formulas first. I'll give you a little bit of time. Give me a wave if you get stuck.
It's saying I have to type in the day in date, but we don't have day, right?
Yeah, so let's go look at our other tab, our campaigns tab, 2024. So how are those dates formatted?
And one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, there you go.
The shape looks really different from yours.
Your shape looks different, okay.
So what this is gonna show you is our total by. And what we wanna show is cumulative. Cumulative meaning
Oh.
for February, we wanna show January, February, for March, you wanna show
Oh,
January.
okay.
March. All right, so I think I left it a little. Yeah, so this is, we wanna display it as a running total. I'm about to go through the charts, I'll show you.
Okay.
All right, so let's look at getting our cumulative revenue year over year sorted out. All right, so first thing we need to do is add that date formula to our 2025 sheet to convert our months into dates. You want to tell us how to do our date formula?
Just type in date.
Perfect, so I'm gonna do equals date, and that's gonna give me my little, I just need my year, month, day.
Yeah, 2025.
All right, so for a year, I'm gonna give it 2025, which I picked up from the context clue that this tab says campaigns 2025, very good.
And then E2.
And then comma, and then E2, because that's the cell that contains my month number, right? So I'm just gonna click here to get my E2.
Yeah, and then 1.
And then 1. Why did I do 1? Because I only care about the months. I don't really care what day it is. And if I go back and look at how my data was structured in my 2024 tab, I see that for every single one of these, the day is 1. So if I only need to know the month, if my other data set is indicating that the date is always the first, then I'm just gonna follow that same here. All right, and then same thing, I'm gonna paste this all the way down. Very good, I can just go in here and check with my eyeballs, right? 2 is February 1st, 4 is April 1st, right? It's like that's working. Okay. For my monthly downloads and my revenue, I'm gonna do the exact same thing that we did before. So here I'm gonna do equals, I'm gonna do X lookup. I'm gonna grab my lookup value, which is my show ID. I'm gonna go to my lookup array, which is my show ID column. And then I'm gonna do my return array, which is my monthly downloads column in that same sheet. All right, so this should be my 3 arguments, that cell with my show ID, the column of IDs I wanna look at, and the column of results I wanna return. All right, so I'll hit enter. And same thing, I can paste that all the way down just by double clicking on the corner. And then revenue, I'm gonna do my same old revenue formula from before. This guy right here, revenue is CPM times downloads divided by 1,000. So I'll come in here and do equals CPM times downloads divided by 1,000. All right, so I'm just doing that same old math here. I'll also see in my formula, it's gonna helpfully highlight for me those 2 cells. So I just have a quick visual check that I actually clicked on the correct ones, which is super handy. Looks like this is already formatted as dollars. If yours is not, I would come up to my number menu and just make sure it's currency or accounting, one of those. And then I'm gonna paste it all the way down. Okay, fabulous. So next thing I am trying to get to is my pivot chart, which is my cumulative spend, all right? So I'm gonna come into my 2025 data. I'm gonna select all of it and create a pivot table. All right, great. And I am going to do, I want my revenue to be my values, right? So if you think about your y-axis of your sort of normal chart, that's what you want to come into your values. So that's my revenue. And then I want to put in my month. So that month column that we just made, my actual date, right? Not my month number, because that was sort of my misformatted column that we just fixed with our date formula, right? So I want to do this one that's date formatted. The reason I want to do that is then the pivot table is going to recognize that it's formatted as a date, and it'll be able to do nice things like label these as January, February, etc., which is some like nice formatting stuff that I didn't have to tell it to. Okay. So I'm going to have something like this from here, from my pivot table. Again, I'm going to come to insert, and since I clicked into my pivot table, I'll see the option for pivot chart. Okay, I can do my pivot chart. I don't want bars in this case. I want that nice area chart to show that nice sort of slope like we had here. So I'm going to come into, click on my chart, click on my pivot chart design tab. So I'm up here in my ribbon, switching to pivot chart design. And then I'm gonna go to change chart type all the way almost on the right-hand side, change chart type. And this area chart is a subtype of line chart. All right, so under change chart type, I'm gonna go to line. And I like this area one. Again, if there's a different one you like, you can pick a different option, but I'm under design tab, change chart type, line, and then area. Okay. I'm gonna change this to area. So this is showing me the same thing as before, right? If I look, it's like 300,000 in January, great, 400,000 in February, like I can see that that's showing for each month. But what I want to show in this chart is cumulative, right? So how much revenue have I accumulated over the month? So as of February, how much money have I made so far this year? Which essentially means I need to add it on. It's like cumulative is this idea of running total that we talked about last week. We did it, or 2 weeks ago. We did it in formula format last time, right? So how to do a formula to calculate our cumulative total, our running total. Luckily, we have that kind of built into our handy dandy pivot functionality. So to switch from this to our cumulative view that looks like this, all we're gonna do is come into our field list where we have sum of revenue. I'm gonna click my little eye icon next to this. And I'm gonna go to my options under show data as. This is gonna give me some handy built-in options. And I'm gonna select running total in. All right, running total in, and then here I'm just gonna do the same as my column I'm using here. So running total in that month. And I'm gonna hit okay. Okay, great. Oh, sorry, I gotta do it in the months. Sorry. Okay, so you're in. I click the I next to my sum of revenue value. I'm in my show data as. I'm going to do running total. And then this is where I need to grab my month. So this is a little confusing because you see it trips me up sometimes. My campaign month is the title of that column, but because I formatted as a date, because we did that formula work, Excel is recognizing that it could group by day or month. That's what these extra days or months little things are right here. That's sort of auto figuring that out for me. So I'm going to hit okay. I'm going to select that month one because it's starting as months here. And that's what's going to give me my cumulative. Now, how could I check that this cumulative total is correct? One thing I can do is just look here to see about how much in total I've gotten to over the course of, looks like we only have data through September here for 2025. So January through September, it's added up to a little over 3.5 million. A way I could go just check that, just kind of gut check that that's working. So I could hop over to my original data tab, just select my whole tab. And when I do that, just put this up a little bit so you can see it. When you select your whole tab, it's going to give you some your whole column rather. It's going to give you some handy summary metrics about that column down in the bottom. And you can see here when I select column H revenue, it's about 3.6 million right there. So that's just a good gut check that I would do to say, okay, now that I made this chart, is this right? Is this doing the cumulative thing that I want to do? This is how I would convince myself that it's correct. If this was a different number, I might have accidentally switched to average or something like that, right? So I'd go back and fix that. Okay, great. So now I've got my chart here. I'm going to do some of the, oh yeah, question?
Can you show how you made the cumulative chart again?
Yes. So you come into your sum of revenue. Oops, I'm clicked into my chart. I come into my sum of revenue value, show data as running total right here. And then this is the little trick. So it'll list all of your fields as they are listed in your sheet. And then down below, it'll give you this nice kind of like date interpretation for any of your date fields. And this is where you want to grab months from. Yeah. Little tricky. Cool. All right. So here I would do a couple of the same quick formatting fixes I did before. Like in this case, when the legend isn't really telling me anything, I like to get rid of the legend. So get rid of that. Always give these a descriptive title. So I'm going to say cumulative revenue 2025, something like this. All right, and then the last thing I want to do is add a slicer. So we added a timeline slicer before, which allowed us in our other chart to split anything out by date. But what I want to do now, from coming over here, is to split by advertiser. So I can see this is all the money or all the sort of advertiser spend that has happened over the year. But I'd like to be able to let my end user click on a specific advertiser and see how their spend changed over the course of the year. All right, so to do that, I'm going to come back to my chart here. I made a few little tweaks. I could make some more formatting tweaks if I wanted. Do this fun gradient one. And then I'm going to go to my pivot chart analyze. And right next to where we clicked timeline before, this time we're going to do slicer. All right, so right in the middle. So I'm in my chart. Up here, my pivot chart analyze ribbon. I'm going to do insert slicer. That's right here. And then this will let me pick which column I want to slice by. Typically for a slicer, you want to pick something that's discrete, meaning something that's like a drop-down menu, is like a little bit cleaner, I think. So I wouldn't pick like CPM here, for example. I would like group that in the data step for this. But advertiser name is something that's in a drop-down, right? There's not that many advertiser names, so that works pretty well for this. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to get this handy little pop-up that's going to list alphabetically all the advertiser names that are relevant. I can make this a little bigger if I want it to display all of them. And this way I can see all of my advertisers. And then same thing for this. If I want to move this chart over to my dashboard tab that I'm compiling, I would click on my chart, go to pivot chart analyze and do move chart. Drop it over to my dashboard. Maybe put it somewhere over here. Again, the slicers don't always move very nicely, so there is a way to move them, but I would probably find it faster to just go over here and move your slicer. Yeah.
When I'm trying to move the table, the sum of revenue doesn't appear. Like it's like all.
When you're trying to move it to the other sheet,
Yeah.
did you do copy paste or did you do the move?
No, it's like this.
Okay, that's just because your column is too narrow. If you make this column
Oh,
a little
really?
wider, that will show
Oh.
your numbers. Yeah, so if you're getting just a
Wow,
bunch
okay.
of pound signs, like hashtag
Yeah.
symbols in your numbers, that's just because your column is too small. It's like abbreviating. So you just make it a little bigger. Yeah. All right, great. So we have this chart for 2025. We want to do the same format of chart for 2024. So I did 2024 in my little sort of pre-example. So we want to put these two side by side so we can see them together. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same chart from my 2024 data. So I'm going to come to my 2024 tab. I'm going to do the same thing again. So select everything, insert pivot table. I'm going to set this up in a new sheet before I take it anywhere. And again, here I'm going to group by, I'm grouping by month in this case. So campaign month. And I'm going to do my values as my revenue. Fantastic. And then I'm going to do my same little trick to get my cumulative revenue once I do my table. So I'm in my pivot table. I'm going to come up to my insert ribbon, do my same old chart. So insert pivot chart. Great. So I can make sure that this is looking right so far. I'm going to go up to my design ribbon and change it again to that area chart. So I'm going to go to design and then change chart type, underline, it's this area chart. Okay. Cool. And then I'm going to do my same thing to switch this to cumulative or running total, where I'm going to come down to my values down here. Little icon. I'm going to do my show data as, and I'm going to select my running total for my cumulative. I'm going to go down and grab my months, since that's how I'm already grouping my table here. All right, and then this is going to change the shape of that chart. Again, this is going up pretty dramatically. So the total here is 16 million. All right, so to just like check that that's working, I might come back to my 2024 tab and just select it all the way down and see if that's right. It says about 15.7 million as the sum. So that makes sense. That checks out. I think my chart is working okay, which is great. So I'm going to do the same little adjustments I did here. I'm going to get rid of my legend. And I'm going to make this title more useful. So I'll say cumulative revenue 2024. All right, great. And then I'm going to move this over to my dashboard. So I'm going to click on my chart. I'm going to come up to my ribbon here. I'm going to do move chart over on the right and move it to my dashboard. Sheet. Okay. Cool. So there's a bunch more tweaks you can do. Some of the same formatting tweaks we did in the first week of this still apply. One of my favorite things to do for a dashboard is to hide the grid lines, which you can do from our view tab under the show section. If you uncheck our grid lines, it gives just a nice plain old white background here, which is really nice if you're going to be super old school and print this out, or even just if you're going to screenshot this to put into a presentation or something like that. Getting rid of the grid lines makes it a lot more readable. Obviously, I would add a title, something like podcast revenue dashboard. The font size a little bit. And that's basically it. So we didn't end up with quite enough time to add your own components. I don't know, maybe some of you checked about adding your own charts, or maybe you did your own metrics if you were running a little bit ahead of schedule. So I hope if you didn't get a chance to do that today, give that a try, right? So the same workflow that we just did, go to one of the tabs. We didn't do anything with the episodes data in this dashboard, for example. So you could do number of episodes by month, some average episode length, something like that. But the last few notes I would make about your dashboard are that you always want to include some good labeling. So we already talked about adding your chart titles, making sure it's really clear what you're looking at. You should always include the date if this was last updated, especially if it's like a Google sheet or something that might get shared around, and your name and like some contact information about you. So like tag yourself in it or something like that, so that anyone who's looking at it knows where to come ask questions, or if they need anything. It's just a good practice. I also like to include a little bit of text on my dashboards to explain what you're looking at. So if someone sees this and they haven't talked to you, they still can figure out what it means. So in this case, I just wrote a really quick sentence. This is revenue trends 2024 to present. I might even do some other little instructions over here for my slicers or timelines. I might write something like, click an advertiser name to filter this chart. Something like that. Doing a little bit of text, just a few kind of finishing touches on your dashboard is always really helpful. Makes it look nice, polished, professional. And kind of like the finished product. Okay. Yeah, a lot more little tweaks you could do, a lot more options we could change, but this is the general idea. This is the type of dashboard that you might find yourself creating if you're a person working with data. I have a little bit of stuff to wrap with, but any last questions about this? Any of these formulas, charts? Feeling okay? Does everybody have at least some components of this set up on their sheet? Okay, great. Cool. So like I said, if Excel is something you've been trying to work on, add to your resume, apply to internships, that kind of thing. This is the kind of thing you could maybe polish it up, get the like colors and get everything lined up nice. And could be a good example, a little addition to your portfolio. All right. So we did all of this stuff. Last thing I would say, someone asked about this earlier. If you update any of the data in your dashboard for your pivot charts, you do need to come in and make sure those charts are refreshed. So if you've updated any of your source data, you can come into any of your charts or tables, go up to your analyze ribbon and just click this green refresh button. There's also a refresh all that'll just refresh everything. It's a slight pain for Microsoft, again, not required in Google Sheets. All right. So that's everything we've covered today. We have covered a lot in these last 4 weeks. We covered formatting, we covered formulas, XLOOKUP, which is a more advanced formula that's quite common, regular tables, pivot charts, a lot of good stuff. So hopefully you all feel like you learned some things that you could bring into if you're using Excel in a class or at a job, something like that. Hopefully this was helpful. If you enjoyed this class at all, I would really encourage you to come back next week when we're going to kick off our SQL and Python for data analysis series. If you're a total beginner, if you've never heard of SQL or Python before, you're completely welcome. We're going to totally start from the beginning. It should also be a good refresher if you've dabbled a little bit before. SQL and Python are data tools that you typically use when Excel, you kind of start running out of what you need to do in Excel. Maybe you're making a dashboard like the one we just did, but it sort of keeps crashing your computer because there's too many different tabs, too much data in there. That's where you'd want to use a tool like SQL or Python. They're a lot of fun. I use these every single day in my job. And I think they're a great one to learn because knowing just a little bit puts you way ahead of somebody who doesn't know anything. So it's a great little thing to have, even just kind of some basic SQL on your resume. It's a great place to start. So I highly recommend it. I've also linked a couple of sort of things where you can learn more. There's a link down at the bottom of our little site today. Includes where you can get the recordings of all of the sessions in this series. They're on the annenbergdl.org website. I also linked a few blogs. Miss Excel is a fun like Instagram, TikTok account where she teaches Excel tricks. So that is a fun thing to add to your feed. And the link to sign up for the SQL Python series if you'd like to come to that. If you enjoyed this class, I would love to hear from you. If you have feedback about this class, things that you didn't like, I would also love to hear from you. I've been teaching this for a few semesters and I made a lot of updates from students who've come before you based on their feedback. So would really love to hear if there's anything you liked or didn't like. So that's that. Everything that we've covered in this class is on our tutorial site. So if you missed any sessions or want a refresher, this site will remain up so you can bookmark this, come back anytime. And like I said, the recordings are on annenbergdl.org. I'm going to hang out for another 5-10 minutes or so. So if you have questions or anything, want to come chat, I'll be here. Otherwise, thank you all so much for coming and I hope to see some of you at SQL and Python.
Thank you.
Thank you.